I'm a classical musician, more specifically a violinist. And I have a question for you. What's the first word you think of when you think about classical music? Soothing? Boring? Beautiful? Exciting? Elitist? Is there a right answer to that question? It's difficult to say, and it depends on a lot of things. What the music is that you're listening to, the listener's experience with that music, what mood you're in when you hear the music, and maybe most importantly, how the music is being played and presented. In 2016, I'm going to embark on a special journey. I'm going to record 3 pieces written for solo violin for Etc. Records. Firstly, the great C major sonata by Johann Sebastian Bach, then the one and only incredible solo sonata by Bela Bartok, Hungarian composer, and lastly, a brand new piece written only for me by the young American composer David Fulmer. This is 3 different composers from different centuries and different nationalities, all together on one disc. So you're probably asking yourself, why is she telling me all this? Well, I will tell you. One of my broader goals with this recording project is to make the pieces that I'm performing more accessible to people of all ages and all walks of life. I want to take my audience on a walkthrough of this musical landscape to make it more digestible. This Bach sonata is the 5th of 6 incredible solo sonatas that he wrote for violin. I found out recently that the fugue in this sonata is the longest fugue that he ever wrote. Now, in case you don't know what a fugue is, let me just explain that briefly. A fugue is a piece of music, a very small theme, that is then presented in different voices at different times, kind of like cutting and pasting. So the first theme of the Bach goes like this. Second voice. Third. Fooling around a little with the material. And here is the 4th voice. So as you can see, I'm essentially playing an entire quartet of voices, 4 different voices, on this one instrument. It's a kind of one-man show, or in this case, a one-woman show. Bach wrote dozens of fugues for all sorts of different instruments, for keyboard, organ, of course, and also groups of instruments like the art of fugue. But these 3 fugues that he wrote for solo violin, which were written in 1720, almost 300 years ago, are really revolutionary because it explores the possibilities of this instrument in a really revolutionary way. The violin is thought of normally as a melodic instrument, but the way that Bach writes for it, it becomes polyphonic, using several voices at once. This fugue is so long, and because of its length, it can be pretty daunting to listen to if you're not somehow prepared for it. It's a little bit like eating a steak in one bite without cutting it into little pieces. Pretty unappetizing and also unreasonable to expect that from a listener. So anyway, this goes on for a while. Very beautiful the way he uses all the themes in different ways. And then he comes to a place that's called an episode that ends with a big cadence in G major. But wait a second, this piece is supposed to be in C major, so something's a little off here. Well, there's a reason for that. First of all, let me play how that sounds. We've now reached the halfway point of the fugue. And what Bach does here is he takes the original theme that we knew from the beginning and he reverses it. So everything that went up is now going down and vice versa. Let me just play the original fugue theme again. It goes like this. But here in the middle of the fugue, he takes that theme and reverses it. And then he writes a fugue on that. So here comes the second voice. And third. And so on. Pretty incredible, right? This is one of the reasons why the fugue is so long, because it's actually two fugues piled on top of one another. First, you have the theme presented in its original form, and then, of course, all of the fugue developments. And then he takes this theme and reverses it and writes a fugue on that. Very long and complicated, but also very beautiful. Essentially, I want to equip you, my audience, with the necessary tools for listening in an informed and active way. Music is a language, and if you don't speak that language, it's unreasonable to expect you to really understand it on a deeper level. You could compare that to having just a basic knowledge of the English language and then being able to understand Shakespeare on a deeper level. That's unreasonable because Shakespeare, as I think we can all agree, is one of the greatest magicians ever of the English language. The way he uses the language in his work is so intricate and beautiful, and you have to come into those works being somehow prepared and having a deep knowledge of the language. I feel that Bach and Bartok are some of the greatest magicians of music, and so I want to share my knowledge and love of that language, of these amazing composers, with you. Bartok wrote his one and only sonata for solo violin in 1944, when he was already dying from leukemia. In fact, it's the last piece that he completed in its entirety before he died 1 year later. As the story goes, Bartok had gotten to know the great violinist Yehudi Menuhin, because Menuhin was working on two of Bartok's other great violin pieces, the first sonata with piano and the second concerto, and he got to know Bartok playing these pieces for him. The two were great admirers of one another, and at some point Menuhin got up the courage to ask Bartok to write a brand new solo piece for him. Bartok agreed, and soon after that he went to hear Menuhin perform in a recital, and one of the pieces on the program was the great Bach C major sonata. Bartok was so impressed by the performance and also just by the music itself that he decided to write a piece loosely based on the C major Bach sonata and heavily influenced by Bach in general. So it's no coincidence that I'm recording these pieces together. Probably many of you are familiar with the Bach chaconne. It's one of the most famous chaconnes ever written, and probably one of the most beautiful pieces ever written for a solo violin. It starts like this. The first movement of the Bartok is called tempo di chaconne, the Italian word for chaconne, and it goes like this. Clearly you can hear the similarities between the two pieces. Of course, it's a different style, it's a different time in history, but there's a similarity in the tempo and in the character. And also something that binds these pieces together is that both composers are using the violin in a kind of symphonic way, very unusual and very challenging also to pull off. Here's another example. After the first phrase of the Bartok I just played, he writes this passage. As you can see, I'm playing all over the instrument, on different strings, on different places in the strings, and on the fingerboard. It's a very unusual way of writing for the instrument. Bartok is using a special technique here that's called octave displacement. So he's taking a theme that's actually pretty simple, but he's splitting it up and putting it in different places, different registers at the same time. If you would have written this theme with everything in the same register, it would sound very different. It would sound like this. But if I play the original text, it's much more interesting. It has a kind of acrobatic feeling on the violin. Bartok is doing this type of thing throughout the entire sonata. He also wrote his own fugue, like Bach, also with 4 voices. But this is a very different character than the Bach. It starts like this. Second voice. Third, and so on and so on. So there are a lot of really cool effects in this fugue. All sorts of things. Pizzicato, which is plucking, including a way of plucking that Bartok himself invented. And in fact, musicians over the whole world call it Bartok pizzicato. It goes like this, where I pull the string vertically and it hits the fingerboard. Makes a kind of snap. There's also something he uses called a glissando, where I put my finger on the string and I slide it. Like that. So this is one of my favorite sections that displays a lot of these different things. I'd also like to talk with you a little bit about the last movement of this piece, because Bartok introduces something very unusual, that's something that can't even be played on the piano. It's called quartertones. Ever heard of quartertones? They're actually half of a half tone. They're not 25 cents each. Let me show you on the piano. If I play these 2 notes, they're right next to each other, G, A flat. And that's called a half tone. That's the smallest distance you can have on the piano. If I would skip this note, that's a whole tone. So that's when there's 1 note in between. So the 2 white notes next to each other are a whole tone. White note next to black note is a half tone. It sounds like this on the violin. But in the last movement of this Bartok sonata, he writes these long passages filled with quarter tones. It sounds like this. So it's a pretty cool effect. This is the whole beginning of the last movement of the Bartok, and I always like to think it sounds a little bit like a bumblebee, whizzing past your ear, very fast and exciting, also a little irritating. And he writes with a mute, which gives an even more special color. It dampens the instrument. So instead of having a nice clear sound, this one muffles it. And that just adds even more to the atmosphere of the beginning of this movement. So that's a small window into the world of these incredible pieces that I'm about to record for you. If you want to hear more, you're going to have to wait for the CD to come out, or come to one of my concerts where I will explain the pieces much more in depth. Hope to see you soon.